It's one of the best days you've had in a long time. The offer came through. The salary's good. After weeks of interviews, of hoping, of refreshing your inbox, someone finally said yes to you. And then the contract arrives. All those pages. And honestly, you skim it. Of course you do. You check the salary, the start date, the job title, and everything in you just wants to sign before they change their mind. So you do. You sign. And in that one happy, hopeful moment, you may have just agreed to things that can quietly follow you for years. Things that can stop you taking your next job, pull money straight out of your pay, move you across the country, or hand everything you create to someone else. Because here's what no one tells you on offer day. The most dangerous parts of an employment contract aren't written to be understood. They're written in calm, boring legal language, specifically so that you'll do exactly what you just did. Skim, shrug, and sign. So before you ever sign another one, or if you want to know what you've already agreed to, let's go through them. 9 clauses hiding in UK employment contracts that can cost you far more than you'd ever imagine. Quick essential note. This is general information, not legal advice. For your own contract, ACAS, Citizens Advice, or a solicitor are who to call. And employment law is changing fast right now, so treat the specifics as your cue to check the current position.
We start with the big one, the clause that can reach past the day you leave and block your future. It's called a restrictive covenant, and the most feared version is the non-compete. In plain terms, for a set period after you leave, you're not allowed to work for a competitor or set up on your own in the same field. Read that again. A company you no longer work for telling you who you're allowed to earn a living from. There are gentler cousins too, non-solicitation, which stops you approaching their clients, and non-poaching, which stops you taking colleagues with you. Now, here is the part that genuinely matters, and almost nobody knows it. In the UK, these clauses are not automatically valid. The starting point in law is that they're unenforceable, unless the employer can prove the restriction goes no wider than is reasonably necessary to protect a legitimate business interest. So a sweeping clause, you can't work anywhere in your industry for 2 years, would very likely be thrown out by a court as far too broad. But, and this is the quiet genius of it, most people never test that. Around 5 million people in this country are working under a non-compete right now, and surveys show roughly half believe their employer would enforce it, so they comply with a clause that might not even be valid. The fear does the work the law never could. You may have heard talk of a 3-month limit on non-competes. Be careful, that was proposed back in 2023. It never became law. The government consulted again into 2026, but as things stand, there is no statutory cap. The old reasonable or nothing test still rules. So if you're being asked to sign one, you can negotiate it down before you ever start. The second clause sounds almost pleasant. Garden leave. It means that during your notice period, your employer can tell you to stay home, still employed, still paid, but cut off. No work, no systems, no clients, no colleagues. It sounds like a holiday. It isn't. Garden leave is a weapon. By keeping you employed but benched, they keep you bound by your contract. You can't start your new job, and your knowledge of the business goes stale while you sit on the sidelines. It's often the partner in crime of that non-compete. Even if the restriction itself is shaky, a long notice period spent on garden leave can keep you out of the market just as effectively, without ever testing a thing in court. So when you read your notice period, don't just ask how long it is. Ask what they're allowed to do with you during it. A 3-month notice you can be sat at home for is a very different thing from 3 months of actually working.
The third one is short, easy to miss, and reaches directly into your wages. It's the deduction from pay clause, a line that says your employer can take money from what you're owed for things like a till shortfall, the cost of equipment, an overpayment, or training. Here's why it's there. As a rule in the UK, your employer can't just deduct money from your wages. They generally need one of 3 things. The law allows it, you've agreed it in writing, or your contract already says they can. That clause is the "your contract already says they can." By signing it, you've pre-agreed to deductions you haven't even heard of yet. So the surprise gap in your payslip months later isn't a mistake, it's the clause, quietly doing its job. You don't have to accept a blank cheque. You can ask exactly what they intend to deduct and when, and push back on anything open-ended. Because once it's signed, a vague deductions clause can be very hard to argue with. The 4th clause turns your own development into a trap. Clawback. You're sent on a course, a qualification, an expensive certification. Wonderful. Until you read the small print. If you leave within a certain time, you have to pay some or all of it back. Sometimes it's thousands of pounds, and it's usually billed as a sliding scale. Leave after 6 months and you owe the lot. After 18, perhaps nothing. The effect is simple. It chains you to the desk. You can't afford to leave, so you stay in a job you've outgrown, paying off your own education with your freedom. But know the limit. For a clawback to hold up, it generally has to be a genuine reflection of the real cost to the employer, not a punishment designed to scare you into staying. A clause that bills you far more than the training actually cost may be an unenforceable penalty. So, before you sign up for that shiny course, read what it costs you to leave afterwards. The training might be free. The exit rarely is. The 5th clause decides how your ending is allowed to happen. It's called pylon, pay in lieu of notice. It means that instead of having you work your notice in, your employer can end your employment immediately and simply pay you for the notice period instead. One conversation and you're gone that afternoon. Now, being paid to leave at once isn't always bad, but the reason it matters is timing. The moment your employment ends is the moment the clock starts on all those after-you-leave restrictions, the non-compete, the non-solicitation. A pylon lets them choose that moment, cleanly. And here's the flip side worth knowing. If there's no pylon clause, and they march you out without working your notice and without paying it properly, that can be a breach of contract by them. And a serious breach can sometimes free you from those very restrictive covenants entirely. It's a quiet, technical clause, but whether it's there or not can change everything about what you're bound by on the way out. The 6th clause can pick up your whole life and move it, the mobility clause. It says your employer can require you to work at a different location, sometimes anywhere in the UK, sometimes any of our sites. You signed up for the office in your town. The clause quietly signed you up for wherever they decide to send you. Watch how this gets used. In a redundancy situation, a mobility clause can be the difference between a payout and an impossible choice. We're not making you redundant, we're relocating you to a site 90 miles away. Refuse, and they may argue you resigned. The clause becomes a way to move you out without ever paying you off. It isn't unlimited. There are arguments about whether using it is reasonable, especially at short notice. But that's a fight you'd be having after the damage. Far better to see the clause before you sign and ask plainly, where, realistically, can you send me, and how much notice would I get? The 7th is the one that quietly unsigns your own contract. The variation,
or flexibility clause. It's the line that reads something like, "The company reserves the right to amend these terms." Sometimes it's about your duties, sometimes your hours, sometimes any other terms as required. Think about what that actually means. You negotiated a deal. This clause hands the other side a pen to rewrite it. Your role can be reshaped, your responsibilities expanded, your arrangements shifted, and the clause is there to argue you already agreed. The good news, this isn't quite the magic wand employers wish it were. Courts are wary of clauses that let one side make sweeping, unilateral changes, and big changes to fundamental terms, like a pay cut, usually can't just be imposed because of one vague line. But a broad flexibility clause still tilts the whole table in their favour. So when you see "we reserve the right to vary," ask, vary what exactly? The narrower you can get it before you sign, the more of your contract actually stays yours. The 8th clause hides inside the best part of your offer, the bonus, the commission, the number that helped you say yes. And the word to hunt for is discretionary. Because a discretionary bonus is, in plain English, a bonus they can choose not to pay. The figure that made the job attractive can quietly become a maybe. It gets sharper with commission. Read carefully for the conditions. Do you still get paid if the client cancels later? Do you lose it if you're under notice when it's paid? Many schemes are written so that the moment you resign, the commission you already earned simply evaporates. A powerful, invisible handcuff right when you're trying to leave. None of this means bonuses are worthless, but you should know what's a promise and what's a hope. If a chunk of your expected income is discretionary, treat your guaranteed pay as your real salary, and everything else as a welcome bonus, not a number you can build your life on. And if the bonus genuinely matters to you, that's the thing to pin down in writing before you sign, not after the year you worked for it. And the 9th brings together what you know, what you make, and what you're allowed to say. Most contracts contain confidentiality and intellectual property clauses. The confidentiality part is often reasonable. Don't leak the company's secrets. But read the IP clause closely, because many state that anything you create connected to the work belongs entirely to them. Sometimes drafted so broadly, it reaches into things you make in your own time. Then there's the entire agreement clause, the quiet one, that says only what's written here counts. So that lovely verbal promise at interview, the early review, the flexibility, the path to promotion, if it's not in the document, this clause is designed to make it vanish. If they promised it, get it written in. But here's the most important and most current thing to know. An employer cannot lawfully use a confidentiality clause or an NDA to silence you about discrimination or harassment. Recent UK reform has been tightening this hard. A gagging clause that tries to stop you speaking up about being mistreated is increasingly not worth the paper it's printed on. So a contract can own your company secrets. It should never be allowed to own your right to speak about being wronged. Know the difference, because they're counting on you not to. So go back to that happy day, the offer, the pen, the pages you skimmed. None of this is here to frighten you out of signing or to make every employer a villain. Most of these clauses are legal, and many are perfectly fair. The danger was never that they exist. The danger is signing them blind, agreeing to things you never read, and only discovering them on the worst possible day, when it's too late to negotiate. Because notice the thread through all 9. Your power over every single one of them is highest at the exact moment you have the least patience for them, before you sign. That's when
could we adjust this clause, is a normal, reasonable question. Afterwards, it's a battle. So next time, read the boring pages, especially the boring pages. Ask about the ones that worry you. Get the promises in writing. And remember that an alarming-looking clause is not always an enforceable one. Many have far less power than the fear they create. You don't need to become a lawyer. You just need to stop skimming the most important document in your working life, and to know that "where do I sign" is a question you're allowed to answer slowly. So tell me below, which of these 9 is sitting in your contract right now?